Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Suju Reaction. This is the Bible Theory Iceberg Explained, Part 2, I guess. Yeah, I saw the half part or 2 tiers, I guess, yesterday. This is really interesting so far. I've been watching Redeem Zoomer video recently, and yeah, this Wendy Gun's one of those creators that can go like basically tier wise, but slowly can basically, put things together. Does he go like I'm pretty sure I remember in one of his videos like he talked about somebody on the Reddit put a list together. So is his like Discord fans or whatever put this kind of list together or something? Because I mean I'm pretty sure like this tier thing means like one of the basic stuffs to like complex stuffs. And so far like I already knew like Bible, if you see throughout the history it has like a one theme to it, then people add to it and something changes along the way. Now in this one, obviously, like one of the biggest thing about Bible that people don't know about Christianity is like mostly angel related stuff, like how much importance angels have. And thanks to Wendigo, now I know the angels used to be terrifying, like oh my god level of terrifying. I didn't know that, but also at the same time it makes them really cool, which also makes me think like why wasn't there any like TV show or movie thing where they can make some kind of a like ridiculous OP animation and type of things, right? Because like those multiple eyes angels, do not be afraid, son. It's like imagine like somebody just like some kind of an angel coming to somebody just like oh my god get away demon, just like oh you have no idea what I am, I'm an angel, like what the fuck. Okay. And with also those like lighting thing, right? Like changing lights and things, like basically giving somebody photosensitivity type of thing. But yeah, these angels are really good. I hope somebody makes a video about all the angels and then characteristic, because that is somehow really interesting. So I guess we're gonna go from tier three and beyond. How many tiers are there? Three, four, and what is the five or last thoughts or something like that? Let's watch it.
Mammon specifically comes from a phrase that Jesus said in the Gospels, which again is the testament of Jesus' life on earth. While talking to the apostles, Jesus says, one cannot serve God and mammon. Now, in most interpretations, mammon is believed to be exactly what mammon is in Hebrew, which translates to wealth or greed. However, some believe mammon to be a quite literal figure or entity that Jesus is telling them not to serve. So much so that this was used as evidence in something during the Middle Ages that was known as the Seven Princes of Hell, which I won't spend too much time on that. But essentially the idea is that there are seven princes or sort of rulers who exist in hell, and each one of them personifies a different sin, and that's where the seven deadly sins come from, which mammon would of course be greed. Also, if you're curious, Lucifer himself would be pride. Divine snakes is in reference to
Kind of makes sense, right? Because in the Hebrew one, like he said, it's like a wealth type of thing, and basically people basically made it into more complex one, like seven princes with seven different sin, including greed and things. It's just like expanding on that element. So, even though it might be different, but not that different, right?
several sort of holy snakes that are used throughout the Bible or used in miracles. For example, Moses throws his staff on the ground in the Old Testament and it turns into a snake before Moses picks it back up and it turns into a rod. Which also brings in more questions when you think about it, like when he threw down the staff, did that create a new snake? And then when he picked it back up, did the snake like die, or has the staff always been a snake?
God.
Or where is God getting all these snakes? Furthermore, serpent specific
The morality questions like this, like in every way, it's gonna be question like okay, especially with this something like AI related type of thing nowadays, but mostly like anything, right? Like Moses, threw his staff and it became a snake. Now when it picked up, like snake disappeared, snake died. Questions like this, like always scratches your head, I guess. But yeah, that is interesting. I'm guessing like when you're talking about like divine things, I guess it's really hard to pinpoint things like that. I always come to that kind of conclusion, like snake. I don't know, just the way snake came, the snake went away. Like where did snake go? I don't. There's not much of a question at that point, right? Because snake didn't existed before the staff was thrown, and then it became a snake. So as soon as it picked the staff, a snake went where it was before. I don't know. It's just weird.
hold a sort of crucial place in a lot of biblical stories. Not only the serpent I mentioned earlier and tried to sort of maybe imply that it could have been Leviathan, or during the time that the children of God were being attacked by fiery serpents and Moses put a serpent on a staff, or the multiple references to the devil himself being a serpent in the Bible. There's a lot of snake imagery, and some believe the form of a snake to be the actual form of the devil. Acts of Peter, like First Enoch, which I
Yeah, I saw the oversimplify. No, wait a minute. What is it? Not oversimplified. Only sarcastic production. I don't know why I mixed the name up as OSBS. Yeah, only sarcastic production video on this. Like, why snake is the one thing that is common in all of the religion and basically different type of civilization, which portrayed as something like really evil or something evil like. And all come to conclusion like snakes are menace, and I guess snakes are everywhere, so people just associate it with that, right? Like, you're not gonna encounter tiger in your home, but there's a high chance that you can find a snake. And snake are one of those like sneaky deadly thing. That's the whole thing, right? Snake are one of the most feared thing, because most people, like, when you go outside, what is the one thing you're gonna fear walking out? It's probably, what if there's a snake there? Snake is the one thing people fear in general, because it can be deadly, it can sneak upon you, and it can hide basically anywhere, and it can be anywhere, right? You're not going to be worried about tiger jumping you here. In basically, how's that going to work? So that's why I think snake are the obvious depiction of something like really evil, or every time in every civilization.
Mentioned earlier, is one of the non-canonical parts of Scripture. Or in other words, it's about tales around Scripture that isn't actually in the Bible. One of the reasons it's not and hasn't been accepted, because similar to First Enoch, the credibility of it is questionable.
I don't want to pause too much, but did this just happen during that? Like, somebody really make this Marvel level of things? Like, things are happening around Bible, and this is like, this is part of this. Is that what it is? Like, like how in the Marvel movies, like something happens in Avenger, was happening somewhere else, and there's some TV show about that. There's gonna be some mention of events that happen in Avengers. This is how it is. So basically, they even did the Marvel thing 2,000 years before Marvel was in a thing or something.
Acts of Peter is believed to have been written by Lucius Charinus, however it's pronounced, who was a companion of John, one of the apostles. However, he himself was not an apostle, so he wasn't directly inspired by God, and yada yada. What's interesting, and that a lot of people don't know, things that are said in the Acts of Peter are not said in the Bible, although people think they are. For example, Peter's death is never mentioned in the Bible. However, here in the Acts of Peter, it talks about how Peter was crucified upside down, along with several miracles that the apostles performed after Jesus left. It's
Why
very
upside down?
interesting because despite not being in the Bible, a lot of people use information from it without knowing it's not part of the Bible. Like, I guarantee you, and I'm saying this as a Christian, you could go up to like 60-70% of Christians who know the Bible and say, how did Peter die? And they're like, oh, he was crucified upside down. It's like, okay, where does it say that? It's in there somewhere. All right, so the Watchers are interesting. They are mentioned in the actual Bible in the story of Daniel, whenever Daniel is talking to the king Nebuchadnezzar, and they communicate to each other that they saw watchers come down from heaven in order to speak to the king. So watcher in this form is being used to describe angels of some sort. Keep in mind the book of Enoch, which I talked about earlier, talks at great length about these watchers and says they're the ones that came down from earth, or at least some of them came down to earth when they fell from grace and created the giants on earth. So many believe that perhaps watchers are the classification of angels that demons originate from, because as it's mentioned in the Bible, whenever Lucifer fell from heaven, a third of the angels fell with him and they became the demons, or as they're called, devils on earth. So this is another one that's open for a lot of debate. Are the watchers their own classification of angel? Is it just referring to the angels that went bad? Who knows? The Son of Man in the fire.
Yeah, that is interesting, right? Like, the watchers are the fallen ones, right? And that is what basically Lucifer and his like other angels are, like fallen ones, right? So there would be demons. That kind of makes sense. Obviously, the like interpretation, like it's gonna go, like I said in the previous part, like, the way Bible and the stories are made, I guess you can have your own take to it. So it's Bible has longevity because of that. But yeah, I don't know. But if there is no like one specific thing like mentioned, like other watchers demons or not, like I don't know. What are like hardcore like Christian, who basically Christian scholars or whatever, what are their take on it, right? I mean, I don't know how many denominations have this kind of like specific scholars. I'm pretty sure Catholics have them, right? Catholic, Jesuit priests and whatever they are, right? So what are their take on it? And there must be like some definitive proof in somewhere, right? Written somewhere.
With
Proof
Shadrach,
as in like
Meshach, and
writing.
Abednego. Okay, so story time. In the Old Testament, remember this is before Christ, which is going to be important in a second. The king I just mentioned, Nebuchadnezzar, was not a very nice dude at all, and decided to throw three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were followers of God, into a furnace to kill them. After he threw them into the fire, they didn't die, and then after looking into the oven, instead of just being Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he said that he could see four people in there with him, and the fourth is as the Son of God. Now, if you're following along, this creates a few issues. For one, this is before the New Testament, or as it's understood when Jesus came to earth. Jesus is understood to be the Son of God. So this specific phrasing, the fourth looks to be the Son of God, implies that Jesus was able to be present before the New Testament, which again, it makes things a little wonky. Two, how on earth did they know what he looked like? He specifically says it looks as the Son of God. And then third, to add another layer of confusion to this whole thing, Nebuchadnezzar immediately pulls the three of them out of the fire and starts to ask for forgiveness because, watching them not die in the fire was pretty good proof that maybe they know what they're talking about. He tells them how great it is that God sent his angel to save them. Okay, so now it is the Son of God and also angel.
Okay, isn't the New Testament post Jesus? Like Jesus came, the crucifix and everything, and then the New Testament is about, right? As far as I know. Now, this is before that, okay? So that just implying that Jesus was always there before just getting born as Jesus. Now, the form of Jesus that was born and got grown up and everything, died and resurrected, maybe that wasn't present there, but some form like Holy Spirit, there's also like something like, right, something like that, right? Or maybe Jesus in some form was there. Now how do they know that was Jesus? I guess a guess, because it's like there's a figure there. It's either can be God or Son of God. Why not, right? And since if I can remember correctly, God doesn't interact with the universe that way. God interact with the universe through the Spirit, right? The Trinity Spirit. So maybe they're just like, okay, that must be Son of God, or basically like that. So maybe it's based on something. I don't understand the issue there. Like, what is the other issue that like causes problem here with this type of story?
And I'm not trying to get personal with this. Everything that I've said to this point has been me objectively looking at it. But when it comes to translational stuff like this, it's all subjective, so I have to be a little personal. In my personal interpretation, as we talked about earlier, with the potential of giants being quite literally sons of angels, and it refers to the angels as sons of God, then whenever Nebuchadnezzar here was saying it looks to be a son of God, and then immediately says God sent an angel, I think he was meaning angel, because at this time, before the actual Son of God, aka Jesus, existed, sons of God was used to refer to the angels. So yeah,
Makes
that's
sense.
my best guess at it. The beloved apostle is interesting. So
Makes
during
sense.
the life of Christ, if you'll remember, I said that there were 12 apostles. There's one apostle that keeps being referred to as the beloved apostle, or the apostle that Jesus loved. What's interesting is it's never directly said which apostle this is. Now, Jesus loved all of the apostles, but it's shown that he shared a very special kindred spirit with this one specific one. For example, at the Last Supper, it says that the beloved apostle was laying on Jesus' shoulder and listening to him speak. And whenever Jesus was dying on his cross, it says that he was looking down at his mother and the beloved apostle, to which he told his mother, "This is your son now," and he told the beloved apostle, "This is your mother now. Take care of each other." So again, while Jesus loved all of the apostles, it seems that he had a very special broship with this one in particular. However, at the very end of the book of John, which is again one of the gospels,
So just like parents love their children, one is definitely more special. Is that it? Okay. Who's the one in the photo, right? The supper. Who's closer to Jesus? Maybe we can make some assumptions from that. I don't know.
last two verses, it says Jesus spoke to his beloved apostle, which is the apostle currently writing this scripture. Implying at the end of John, it is revealed that John himself is the beloved apostle. That's the most common, and it makes a lot of sense in the whole canon of the gospel. For example, it makes sense that John would be with Jesus through his entire walk, so then Jesus would entrust him to take care of his mother. However, there are some more theories. For example, Lazarus, who is famous as being one of the people that Jesus raised from the dead, it's referred to that Jesus loved both him and his sister, and after Lazarus dies, Lazarus' sister comes to Jesus and said, "He who thou lovest is dead." There's some that also say it may have been James, as well as one theory that says the beloved apostle was purposely never named because at the time they were being hunted down by the Roman soldiers, and since this one was never seen with Jesus by any eyewitnesses, they kept his name a secret. However, like I said, and I don't get into opinions again, John saying it was him is a pretty surefire sign that it was like probably him. Come on, guys. Acts of John is the same thing.
Really, really. So the favorite apostle of Jesus, the one who's writing the book, because I have the pen. Isn't there something like that? I don't know. But then again, like a lot of things that we take from for Christianity or anything Jesus related is from the book. So if you're gonna believe things from the book, you might as well believe that he's the favorite apostle if it says it. I don't know. But at that point, like, come on. I like all of that, like actual theories, and people are making like, oh no, it was this, no, it was this, no, it was Lazarus, no, it was this. Like,
Is Acts of Peter. As a matter of fact, it is believed to be written by the same guy who wrote Acts of Peter. It is tales of John's life and the other disciples that is not part of the scriptural canon. A lot of the Acts of John is more of a personal introspection into the disciples themselves and even Jesus. For example, it talks about how Jesus enjoyed singing, which is neat, as well as describing more miracles that the apostles performed. Naked boy fleeing from Gethsemane is a really random and
see, the thing is with the, like Jesus does singing. That is really important because that makes singing as something like praise and appreciated thing in the culture. Like that's really important because there are many cultures. Like I'm pretty sure, like somewhere, like this might be loose interpretation of in Islam, math in general is considered somewhat evil, if I remember correctly. Like either it's math or something related to math or something like that. Now that is very important thing because golden age of Islam was like what 1,000 years ago in the year 1000 around it, and after like this was like this like okay manipulation of numbers. I think that's the thing. Manipulation number is like evil, and since that without math there is no science. So if you do that and your culture basically accept that, so obviously you're gonna right because religion was like one of the most important things in history for a civilization basically for whatever group, right? Like all the Christian speaking countries relied on the religion as the thing that they believe in. Same thing with Islamic countries. So if your religion says like manipulation of numbers is like evil thing, but from there on, like you're not gonna do anything with the numbers. If you're not doing anything number, you're not gonna be contributing in science in any way. So you can see that like nowadays, look at like in scientific discovery, Islamic countries are just not there compared to 1,000 years ago when they were the like the leading one, right? Golden age of Islam, like what is a half of the stars that have Arabic names to it. So this is important when Jesus likes singing. So okay, you feel like okay, that's a small thing, but it's really not, because that can help the culture, accept and appreciate a form that is like singing.
weird one. So in the book of Mark, which again, one of the gospels that talks about the life of Jesus, for 2 verses, out of nowhere, it says, while Jesus was being arrested by Roman soldiers, so this was immediately after Judas betrayed and told the soldiers where Jesus was, that a boy who was naked in nothing except a linen robe that he was wearing around them began to follow the parade of soldiers that had Jesus arrested, to which the Romans tried to chase him off. They ripped the linen off of him and he ran into the night naked. And that's the only mention of it. It never gives him a name. It just says the young boy. He literally shows up out of nowhere. He leaves literally into the night, and that's
Okay,
it. That's all we got. Now, while it wasn't 100%
Okay. So if there is no lesson behind it or anything like that, so that was like a literal event probably happened, right? Otherwise, like there is no lead to it, there is no end to it. Like that's it. That's all it happens without like pointing to anything. So that is like interesting.
uncommon for people to be naked except for one robe that they wear around them. The wording's interesting. So the specific wording as it's originally written is a linen cloth, and the way it's written in Hebrew is never said anywhere else throughout the Bible except when it's talking about burial clothing. All right, so here's the theory people go with, and bear with me for a second. So several times throughout the Bible, we see the Holy Spirit or the power of God being used to raise people from the dead. Like, obviously, we have examples in the Old Testament where, like, Elijah put his staff on a young boy and he came back to life. Or whenever Jesus told Lazarus to arise and Lazarus walked out of the tomb. But we also see it happen in sort of incidental ways. For example, whenever the prophet Elisha died, he was buried and put into a cave, to which then someone else was being buried in that cave. And while they were being buried, their body touched Elisha's, and it said the spirit essentially shocked him back, and the man who was being buried came back to life. So we see here, again, according to the Bible, the power of God directly creating miracles of bringing life back. All right, so again, bear with me on this. Whenever the Roman soldiers came to approach Jesus, they asked Jesus, "Who are you?" And Jesus said, "I am." If you'll remember back in tier 1, the original name of God, which is to never be spoken, is believed to mean I am, which is why the English translation is I am that I am. It's said that in the garden, whenever Jesus replied with this I am, there was a rumbling and a sort of shockwave that went out. Because, again, going off that theory I mentioned earlier, he said the actual name of God, which is powerful and not to be spoken. And the Garden of Gethsemane is located immediately next to a graveyard. So off of that, is it possible that Jesus said the true name of God, which was so powerful that, as it says, it rippled through the men there, and just like with Elisha's body, caused enough spirit to raise someone from the dead? And that's why a naked boy was following Jesus, trying to see who it was that brought him back from his dead, in nothing but a burial cloth. I don't know, because like I said, the boy's only mentioned for those 2 verses and never again. And I know I'm reaching, and I don't want to be sacrilegious, but again, we're talking about theory, we're talking about concepts, and I think it's really cool and a little too cool not to. The Apocalypse of Abraham.
I like that. I like the whole thing. One thing I don't like, okay, how would he know that Jesus is the one who's the result of him being alive? Well, I like that whole thing. Obviously, there is no mention of this anywhere in the Bible, like he said. But is it his Wendigoon's theory, or this is the theory that's going out? I'm guessing it's Wendigoon's theory, but it is really good. That is what happens when you have like somebody like Wendigoon making a lot of videos about conspiracy, this iceberg, that iceberg. Your mind becomes like that, and this is like one of the coolest thing ever. Like I would have never thought of that when I heard like, okay, the boy with the clothes. But I like he just went all investigationary with this, realizing that cloth is like a burial cloth, and that thing happens, and saying the name of God does have this kind of effect. So it must be that. That is like better version. Any other version you can come across like, okay, but what Wendigoon said is just I like that a lot. Like this has layers to it. Like I like it. So that was really good, man. Imagine that, right? And I like the whole thing of like basically like what is that, like a Fus Roda level of like Skyrim type of thing. I'm guessing like all those things come from the Bible. That's the inspiration is like words of power. If saying the God's name in the, Jesus said God's name and that caused ripple type of thing. I mean, that's where it comes from. So that is also interesting. I like the emphasis on power all around. Right? Even saying the name has this kind of an effect.
Abraham is very similar to the Book of Enoch in that it is a book written around the idea of an Old Testament character that's not part of the Bible. A lot of the Apocalypse of Abraham talks about Abraham's early life and how he helped his father make false idols of lesser gods. Not only that, but it says that whenever it comes time for Abraham to learn what his destiny is as the follower of God, that God shows him everything. By everything, I mean from creation through all of time to where he sees God himself, and then he sees how time's going to end, which is why the book's called the Apocalypse of Abraham, because a lot of the focus on it is how the world ends. And again, while not a part of the accepted Bible, which people believe, the story is very interesting. For example, Abraham travels with the agent Yahoel, which I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and to which Yahoel does battle with the demon Azazel. And this would also be one of the first mentions of Christ specifically, as God says that there will be a man to come and make a remediation for sins. Which, looking at it on a timeline, the idea that this could, and again, this isn't part of like true scripture, so nothing definite, or at least nothing definite in the Christian context, but the idea that Christ could have been mentioned that far back is really something. Unknown miracles refers to the last verse in the book of John. This is said immediately after the part I talked about earlier where John says that he is the beloved, to which he then continues. Actually, you know what? Just like I did for the other one, I'll just read it. In the last verse of John, it says, "And there are also many other things which Jesus did, the which, if they should be written every one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that should be written." In other words, John is saying here that Jesus did so much while on earth that the world could not contain the books of everything that happened. This implies more miracles. This implies more.
Now that I have a problem. If all the miracles Jesus did for the people, books are smaller than the people, and if the Jesus did miracle for so many people that the words of those miracle can me. Okay, so wait a second. Love of yeah. So the miracle thing, if the words of those miracle cannot contain on all the books, that would like be bigger than the word or whatever it says. That would imply that there would be more than the people on earth or something. Yeah, all right. Where was I? Yeah, about that. If the all the miracles that can be written into books, and those books are gonna be so many, they can be contained in the world, implying that miracle that was done to people is much bigger than they are, or something. Or let's just say all of the people on the planet. And if the miracle was done for all the people on the planet, then how is there any issue or anything evil or whatever, right? Because aren't miracles supposed to be like bettering something? I don't know. Because I don't know if I'm not understanding this right or not. But if the books cannot be contained in all the books cannot be contained in the world, they would surpass the number of people by a magnitude of God knows what, right? So how does that work? I don't know. I guess it's just like exaggerating way of saying like way too many people miracle was done for it or something.
Teachings, this applies more doctrine, which all implies that what we get out of the Gospels, or the 4 books that talk about the life of Christ, are just a fraction of everything Christ did while on earth, which also explains away a lot of the historical inaccuracies, as some say, of the Bible. For example, in the Bible it talks about a lot of locations that Jesus visited and what he did, but then some will point to a location in which Jesus was seen and taught, but it's not mentioned in the Bible, so people consider that an inaccuracy. But as John just said, the Bible doesn't contain everything he did a whole lot more. The Witch of Indor has caused a lot of debate, as it seems to be
I like that element of it. Basically, saying unknown miracle implies like whatever like issues people might have with accuracy is like okay, again like not everything's in the book. You can say that. So like I said in the start, like everything the Bible does and how it said things, it can open like interpretations. So even if somebody has different take of it, like look at all the denomination. If somebody had a different take on it, it wouldn't necessarily be wrong. So longevity is there of the Bible, right? Like people are not gonna have so much issue that one point people stop believing or something. At least that's not gonna happen.
a witch performing actual necromancy. Without giving the background, the wicked king Saul was trying to find a witch to speak to the dead prophet Samuel. So Saul, under cover of night, goes to this Witch of Indor, as she's called, and she is able to conjure up the spirit of Samuel. So this raises a lot of questions. How could someone that is not a true follower of God perform a miracle such as bringing someone, or at least their spirit, back from the dead? The common belief, or at least the most common belief in Christianity, since this is only the one time it's mentioned, is that because of Saul's sin, Samuel was sent by God to challenge Saul directly, and it wasn't because the witch was powerful, it was because Samuel, which he did, was about to punish Saul. However, some believe that necromancy is quite possible, and here's a biblical example of it. Samyaza, which I don't have a lot to say because I wasn't able to find a lot of distinct information on, is the leader of the Watchers that is mentioned in First Enoch. Now, this gets into a whole lot bigger implications, right? If First Enoch is not an actual part of the Bible or an illegitimate part of the Bible, then how does it have all of this information? How is there this hierarchy of angels? Were the Watchers real? Etc., etc. Remember how I said there were 3 books of Enoch? Well, while the third one's not really related, the second one is quite odd. So if you remember, I said the character of Enoch himself ascends to heaven without having to die. Well, the book of 2nd Enoch talks about what he saw on his way through heaven. Specifically, it describes in detail a 10-layered heaven with each layer being a different place, with God himself residing at the 10th layer. Now, ideas of a 10-layered heaven are adopted in different biblical religions, many of the sources coming from this in the 2nd book of Enoch, but between his description of the 10-layered heaven and the talk of celestial war shortly afterwards, a lot of beliefs, or the majority of beliefs, don't agree with it. Because as
Yeah, see the layer system. I was just thinking, like, okay, where is that coming from? But I'm guessing around this time, especially on the Roman Empire, things like a layer system was there, right, with the authority and everything. So why wouldn't there? People would just think, why wouldn't there be layers of heaven, right? Like tiers of heaven, let's just say, as this video has tiers, something like that. So a lot of time I analyze things like this. I analyze based on like where it's coming from, how are people thinking back then, right? Does it make sense in that way? I'm guessing that this is where who was the like it I forgot that, the who wrote the whole thing about hell and its levels and whatever. I forgot his name, and I watched the video on yeah, OSP video on it. Yeah, so basically he got the idea from this, basically Enoch, about the layer system, right? Like how many levels are there and things like that. But yeah.
mentioned with the Acts and the Apocalypse of Abraham, it isn't really something that can be verified. And we are now on to tier 4.
You know what, people? It's like 30 minutes. I wanted to do in 2 parts, but I guess we'll have to do 3 parts. So yeah, this is the last year, I'm guessing. So yeah, it is getting interesting by the minute, right? I like how like there are mentions of different things. I like that whole story about the boy with the cloth linen thing, right? I mean, I wouldn't have thought of it, but when he said like, okay, like it's a burial cloth, that's a thing there, right? And during this time, when the God says I am, so that must have caused some kind of a power surge, let's call it, and somebody was resurrected, some kid or something who was just following that. That's, I don't know, I'm not gonna lie, like this was one of the best type of explanation I've seen of any kind. Some of that's just too awesome. I'm surprised nobody else has come to that conclusion, and I think somebody should really put some Reddit thread or something just talking about this in biblical community, because this is really good. I mean, Wendy Gun's explanation is so good that people should really, like Christian people at least, to talk about this more. But yeah. Alright, well, that was the Bible Theory Iceberg explained by channel Wendy Gun. If you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe. I'll do the third part tomorrow, obviously. And if you want to do any reactions, comment down, because of this type of format, I can do more videos now. And yeah, even the longer one like this. So yeah, I'll see you next time.